All right, geometry. Today is our last lesson for Unit 4. We're going to be talking about lesson 27-2, which is going to involve completing the square to find the center and radius of a circle. So make sure you have your Springboard book open. We are starting on page 396. Okay, so let's start with question 1 here. Now, in the previous lesson, we wrote equations for circles, and we know our general equation for a circle, okay, is y equals, we have our x minus h squared plus y minus k squared. Sorry, it's not equal to y squared, it's equal to r squared. Okay, where h and k are our centers and r is our radius. Okay, now let's look at this equation here. Now they kind of have it split up, so it's a hard kind of to read it. This equation here. It says, given this equation, x squared plus 6x plus y minus 2 squared equal to 16, how is this equation different than our form of the equation that we learned in the previous video? Well, hopefully we noticed, okay, that this equation has an x squared and a 6x, okay, where our circle equation has x minus h quantity squared. So it's kind of broken up in this equation that the book started us off with as number 1, okay? Now the y minus 2 looks correct. It's in its parentheses squared, but the only thing that's a little off is that x part. So when this happens, we can't find the center of the circle because we need it to look like this, x minus h, okay, in order to find out what that h value is so we could pick out the center point. So when we have an equation like this, we need to complete the square in order to figure out how to rewrite x squared plus 6x as x minus a number squared. Okay, so in Algebra 1, you did learn how to complete the square and rewrite some quadratic polynomials. Now your book's using this kind of visual here about taking a square and completing it with that little extra square. I honestly didn't understand what they were talking about. So instead, I'm just going to show you how to do it quickly using some algebra formulas. Okay, but in a standard form equation, we have y equals, let me try to write it over here. We have ax squared plus bx plus c. That's our standard form for a quadratic formula. So in order to complete the square, find what number would make us get a parentheses squared like this, we have to use this little formula, which is b over 2, and then squared. Complete the square. So the b is that middle term. You would take that middle term, cut it in half, and then square that number. So I gave us a little example here. I just added it in. But to find the number that completes the square, I would take this 20, cut it in half, so 20 over 2, and square it. Now, I didn't include the sign in there because when I square it, it's going to turn positive no matter what it was. So I kind of just ignore the sign for now. But half of 20 is 10. 10 squared would be 100. So the number that would complete the square is 100. So that's how you find it. Now, the whole point of this is to rewrite it so it matches our circle formula. So let me show you a little quick trick. Okay. In your parentheses, it's always going to be x. This keeps moving on me. We're going to always have the same sign from our original problem. So this would be minus. And it's always half of your middle term. So in this problem, it'd be 10. Okay, so a little general formula here. It's x. The sign will always match your original problem, but it's always going to be b over 2 in the parentheses. So in this problem, it's x squared minus 20x plus 10. Now, technically, this comes from factoring it. Okay, we have 100 on top, negative 20 on the bottom. Factors that multiply to 100 but add to negative 20 would be negative 10 and negative 10. So this is that perfect squared trinomial where both of our factors would be x minus 10. So instead, we can write it as x minus 10 squared. Okay, so just remember a couple things. So to complete the square, you have to figure out, okay, that b over 2 squared. That's going to help us rewrite it as a quantity squared to match our circle formula. Okay. So let's look at that example. Again, we have x squared plus 6x plus y minus 2 squared equal to 16. Now, the only thing we really have to change here is the x squared minus 6x. The y minus 2 is already set up like our circle equation. So what I'm going to do is take that x squared plus 6x, and I'm going to put a plus a blank, okay, because I'm going to complete the square there. So I'm just going to kind of move everything down, put in the rest of the equation. Now here's the part where you have to remember to do a little extra something. Okay, we have to keep this equation balanced, so I can't just add in a number without balancing it on the other side. So whatever I add to the left side, we add the same exact thing to the right side. Okay. So now let's complete the square. We're going to take our b term, 6, divide it in half, and then square that number. So 6 over 2 is 3. 3 squared is 9. So 9 would complete the square in both of these. So if I add 9 to the left side, I'm going to balance it out by adding it in on the right side. So if you put those plus blanks in there, it kind of helps you out a little bit, just to kind of remember to keep it balanced on both sides. Okay, so the whole point of this is to turn this trinomial into a parentheses squared. But if you remember my little pattern, okay, it's going to be x. Keep the same operation. So since it's plus 6x, this will be x plus. And it's always half of your middle term, because 3 times 3 is 9. 3 plus 3 is 6. Now the rest of this will stay the same because we didn't change anything else. So we have plus y minus 2 squared equal to, well, 16 plus 9, that's 25. So now we change that quadratic equation into something that looks like our circle formula. So now that we have it in our circle formula, we can pick out the center. Remember, the center is always the opposite sign from here. So it's going to be our center is at -3, +2. And remember, our equation is always equal to our radius squared. So if our radius squared is 25, our radius must be 5 then. Okay. So let's practice another one on the next page. We have the check your understanding. We're just going to do letter A so we can kind of move on from there. But I'll help you start it and kind of get it set up. Okay. So we have to change this to x squared minus 2x. We have to complete the square. So I'm going to put plus a blank. Now the y squared's already done. Okay, this is technically like y minus 0. But since there's no other like y with that, we don't have to complete the square actually for that one. So that's going to equal 3. Just don't forget to balance out your equation. So whatever you add to the left side, balance it out by adding it to the left side. Okay, so if my b term is a -2, what value is going to complete the square there? Well, half of 2 would be 1. 1 squared is 1. So 1 completes the square. So the whole point is to turn that trinomial into a quantity squared. So it's x, always the same sign, so minus. And it's always half the middle term. So we're going to have x minus 1 squared. Bring down the y squared. We already got that. And then 3 plus 1 is 4. So there is our equation. Let me rewrite it over here so we can see it a little better. So plus y squared is equal to 4. Okay. So again, you only really complete the square for the problems that have like the x and like the x squared and the constant x. Okay. If they don't have that, then you don't need to complete the square for that value. But let's see if I got the answer right. I did. So they wrote y minus 0, but I don't see the need to put that -0 in there. We're good. Okay. Let's move on to the bottom here. Now this just says sometimes equations for circles become so complicated that you need to complete the square for both variables. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over C and D, because you can see in both of those problems you have an x squared and an x, and then a y squared and a y. So we're going to have to complete the square twice for both parts. Okay. So let me go through it with you guys. I'll do one of them, and I'm going to have you guys try the second one. So for C, we have x squared minus 8x plus a blank. Because we're going to complete the square there. Okay. Then we have plus y squared minus 14 y plus a blank is equal to 16. But remember, we have to balance it out. So plus blank plus blank. All right, let's complete the square one thing at a time. So for my x's, I would have to take 8, cut it in half, and then square that number. So half of 8 is 4. 4 squared is 16. So 16 and 16 completes the square. Okay, for my y, I have 14. Half of 14 is 7. 7 squared is 49. So I'm going to add 49 in there. And make sure whatever you add to the left side, balance it out on the right side. Okay, let's start with our x's. We're going to rewrite this as something squared. So follow the patterns. It's x. It's always the same operation. So we're going to keep the minus. And remember, it's always half the middle term. So that would be x minus 4 squared. Because 4 times 4 is 16. 4 plus 4 is 8. All right, second one for my y's, I'm going to have to do, we have y, keep the same sign, so minus. So that's going to be y minus 7 squared, because that's half of 14. Bring down my plus in the middle. And then the only thing we just have to clean up now is the right side. So we have 16 plus 16, so that's 32. And then add that to 49, we should get 81 here. Now the directions say to find the center, okay, and the radius. So for this problem, our center is our HK. So that would be at, since it's the opposite sign of what's in the parentheses, okay, it's going to be at 4, 7. Our radius, well, 81 is, remember, r squared, so that means our radius is the square root of that, or 9. Okay. So again, in some problems, you have to complete the square twice, but just kind of go one chunk at a time, separate it. Okay, keep your work nice and neat. Don't forget to balance it on the other side. But I'm going to have you guys try D. Okay, you have x squared plus 6x. So again, set it up. I'll help you guys start it. Oops, I don't want that parenthesis there. So we have x squared plus 6x plus a blank. Then we have our y's, y squared plus 12y plus a blank equal to 4, and then balance out your equation. So plus blank plus blank. So I'm going to have you guys finish it. Complete the square for both x and y. Rewrite it in your circle formula like this. So you could pick out the center and the radius. So go ahead and try D, and we'll see if you get it right. Okay, so for this problem, you should have gotten that the center was at -3, -6, with your radius of 7. Okay. Now, if you want to try the other two problems, I will erase the answers. You can always try those and see if you get them right. The reason I didn't go over A and B those because you only had to complete the square for one of the variables. So I already showed you a couple of those. All right, we will practice this more in class, but again, just remember the patterns to complete the square. Okay, it's always half of the term squared, and then rewrite it as that x, same sign, half of your middle term, quantity squared.